Hello and welcome back. This is Candace from Candoodle, and today I'm going to be making this loose watercolor card using some of the digital stamps from the May release at Crescent Creation. So let's get started. So I started by opening my Word document, and I'm just going to go to the insert, and I'm going to insert the two digi stamps that I'm using, so the Mountain Borders and Berry Special. On the Berry Special stamp set, I'm going to use the crop tool because I just want that little camper. That's the only image from this set that I'm going to use. So I'm going to crop all of the other things out. And so you can see there that now I don't have anything else to deal with and I just have my mountains and the little camper. I moved my mountains to the top of the page and then I am going to grab my little camper and I'm going to use the layers and I'm going to put it above the text, and that's going to let me kind of place this how I want in front of the mountains. So I'm just kind of getting that situated in a position I like to make a scene, and then once I am done and happy with that, I'm going to print it out. Now I did use the setting on my printer to print it out very, very lightly on watercolor paper because I wanted to do kind of a no-line watercolor look, and so I printed it in a very, very light gray. And so once that was done, you can see that this is what I'm left with. The lines are almost not visible on camera, but in person they were, I promise. And I just printed it on some student grade Canson watercolor paper, which fits through my printer. So to do this watercolor, and disclaimer, I am not a watercolor artist at all, but I like to experiment with different mediums and I wanted to show how easy it is to use watercolor with digital stamps. And so what I did was I came in just with some plain water and kind of outlined the trees and got them all nice and wet. And then I came in with my Caron markers and I just went around the edges. As you can see, it kind of pools towards the edges. And then I just use my paintbrush to kind of drag the color inwards and I add more where I need to. I wasn't super careful, as you can see. I'm just kind of plunking color down where I'd like to. And it does show a little bit if you're not careful, like the marker points, but I actually think it adds some really nice texture. So I wasn't super careful with that. With watercolor, as you can see, I am not the most patient. If you want to avoid bleeding, that's why I kind of work in different sections at once, because ideally you don't want to be touching a wet section to another wet section or you're going to get some bleeding, which you can see I've had with my trees. But I wasn't super careful because I did know that they were all green, so it wouldn't matter too much if I had a little bit of bleeding between my trees. And where I did, I just came in with my paper towel to kind of sop that up. When I was doing the mountains, I was trying to be a bit more careful so I wouldn't have a ton of bleeding, but you can see I'm just kind of going step by step and making what's in the foreground a bit lighter than the background, and I'm just using some different grays of what I thought mountains might look like. As you can see, I'm not being super careful there with my lines of my marker, but like I said, it actually gives some really nice texture in the end. I decided to use black, which was a lot more pigmented than I thought it would be. So you can see me coming in with a lot of water to try and kind of correct that in my paper towel. And then I got smart and did a bit of a tip to tip, so I wasn't taking as much pigment as the marker directly to the paper. So that's definitely a good idea to use if you don't want too much pigment. What you can also do, which I did later, was scribble my marker down on the side there, and then I pick up from that. That way I can water it down as necessary, so I'm not getting as deep of the color because not as much pigment is there because you're mixing with more water. And so that's what I started doing later on because I realized how pigmented these markers were. The Caron markers are awesome. This is one of the first times that I've used them, and I'm definitely going to be using them more, especially on like florals and things like that. So I wanted to kind of experiment and see how they did with this. And so I just kind of used a palette of black, gray, and green for this scene mostly, but you can use any sort of colors that you like. And again, I was trying to be very careful not to get too many of my colors mixed with each other. I was rushing when I got to this window point, so as you can see, I go in with the green and I am getting a lot of bleeding. So I finished off and wiped off what I could with my paper towel, and then I came back later to clean up some of the lines when it was a bit drier. I got a larger paintbrush when I did my ground, and I kind of just laid down water, and then I came in with the pen directly at the top, and then I just put a very thin layer of green across the whole thing. What's awesome about these is the color builds up super well. So as you can see, I scribbled off some green there on the side, and I'm just coming in and picking that back up to add some depth in the shadow below my camper and things like that. And there's me coming back to fix the windows. And so once that was all done, I let it dry for a while and then I came back in to do the sky. For this one, I did use my Ecoline watercolor, which is just some basic liquid watercolor. And I was very careful to try not to overlap anything that I had already painted to keep the bleeding minimal. I just wanted there to be like kind of a light sky look, and it doesn't have to be perfect because some of this is going to get cut. So I wanted to make this a slim line, but it wasn't quite wide enough. So I decided I was going to make a mini slim line. So this is going to require some partial die cutting. So I put it where I wanted the scene to cut off on the right hand side, obviously because some of it wasn't painted. And I ran that through my die cutting machine and I very carefully peeled my washi tape off so I didn't rip any of my paper. And then as you can see, I am going to shift that over just a little bit and line up where I want it to cut off on the left-hand side. And you can feel it kind of click in to the stitches and the part that's already cut. And then I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine just a little bit through the left-hand side. And then that is going to give me a perfect mini slimline card that is kind of my own dimensions. This particular card panel was 3.5 by 7 5/8. So what I like to do is cut a card base that is going to be 1/4 of an inch larger on each side. So for this one, I did 3 3/4 by 7 7/8 card base. And that way it gives a nice kind of outline of white around the whole card panel. And I just really like that look for my cards. And then I'm going to come in with my ATG, being very generous because my watercolor paper was a little bit warped. And then I am going to press that down and make sure it is stuck nice and well. The last thing, I am going to get my L'Enfant Village shops because it has a cute little sentiment that says enjoy the little things, which I thought was perfect for this card. I'm using my anti-static tool and some Versamark ink to stamp down my sentiment because I am going to white heat emboss this. And I find with my white heat embossing, it can sometimes be a bit blotchy and things like that. What I've been doing lately is heating it from behind, and I seem to get a better look when I do that, so that might be something worth trying. I did line up the sentiment where I wanted it to go on the card so I could mark and trim off the edge so it ends right where our card base does. And once that is done, I am going to glue it all together with some little embellishments. We do also have a hop going on today on Instagram with the Crescent Creation design team, and there are two $10 gift cards up for grabs. So I'm going to put all of the info down below in the description. We would love for you to come and check it out and enter for your chance to win. All of the details will be below. And there we have the final card. I hope you enjoyed today's loose watercolor technique and it's giving you another idea to try with your digi stamps. I will see you later in another video. Bye!